Well, it's now time. Now that the 2021 regular season has ended, it is now time to make my playoff picks for the 2021 NFL playoffs. And before we begin, though, I have to show you my record for picks this year. But this week I went 11-5, which was worse than week 17, but still pretty good. But overall in 2021, I went 107, 101-1. With a winning percentage of 62.7%. This is a massive downgrade from 2020, where I went 107, 85-1. Matched my win total, but I had a lot more losses, and I almost had 2/3 correct. And it's close to where I was in 2019, which was worse than my this year's picks, where I went 158, 97-1 with a win percentage of 61.9. This is, I believe, the first season ever I had over 100 losses in my predictions, but of course that's supposed to be due to the extra week. Very unfortunate. It's not the worst season I had in terms of picks, but it most certainly was nowhere near my best, as you could see right there. So if only I might be able, maybe later on I'll look up my stats for like the 3 years after this, 2019, when I did picks and all. But we'll see my results in comparison to other times. But now, of course, before we get into my picks, I want to talk about a little bit of the teams in the playoffs. So, of course, I'll start off with the AFC, of course, 1 through 7 in terms of ranking. So, if we start off with the Titans. Wow. I can't believe it. When they were 6-2 and Derrick Henry went down, I did not think this was going to happen. Honestly, I would be surprised if they even made the playoffs. Because, dude, it wasn't just that Derrick Henry went down. Ryan Tannehill played not good, and Julio Jones was ineffective for pretty much the entire season. Like, nothing was going right for Titans throughout the year. The only thing that was saving them was Derrick Henry. Then when he went out, I thought, oh yeah, they're pretty much done. But no, they kept on winning, and winning, and winning. And they ended up finishing 12-5, not only making the playoffs for the third year in a row, not only winning the AFC South for the second year in a row, but they got home field advantage for the first time since 2008. Absolutely stunning. And of course, Derrick Henry might come back in the playoffs, which, if he does, this Titans team could be very scary. But even with Henry, I still think they are honestly the worst number 1 seeded team since the 2015 Broncos. Like, even with Henry in there, that offense was still pretty bad. So they better hope they keep that momentum going and Derrick Henry goes off in the playoffs, or otherwise they could be one and done for all I could see. And honestly, they probably deserve it because they are not that good for a number 1 seed. And then after that, it's the second seeded 2-time AFC champion Chiefs, as they, of course, remember earlier, took a massive stumble when they started off 3-4, but I knew they were going to eventually get it figured out, and they did. They ended up winning all but their one game, with that one being a close one, so they could have still won home field advantage after that terrible start, but they went 12-5, the worst record as Mahomes as a starter, but it was still enough to make the playoffs for the 7th year in a row, which I believe is the longest streak in the league right now, and they've won the AFC West for the 6th year in a row. But of course, now they're going to have to play in the wild card round, the first time since 2017. So they are honestly very scary compared to like the Chiefs. Their offense is clicking, and now this defense, which was non-existent for a lot of 2020 and the first half of like 2021, now it's really good. This team honestly might even be more scary than the 2019 Super Bowl team, so they're definitely going to make probably a big run this year. And then we get to a surprise one in terms of how they did, and that's the Bills, as they struggled pretty much the year. It was like a reverse of the Chiefs. They struggled not because they were playing bad, they just kept blowing losses that they really shouldn't have. They went 11-6, which was enough to have the third year in a row in the playoffs, and they won the AFC East for a second year in a row. But this is not an 11-win team. They are right up there with the Chiefs in terms of performance, how they played this year. But all those losses came back to bite them, as once again they're going to set off in the wild card round. And then this one was a surprise. The Bengals! I had the Bengals having like at least 7 wins this year. I thought they were going to have a good improvement, but I didn't think they were going to go anywhere in that very competitive AFC North. But not only did they made the playoffs for the first time and won the AFC North for the first time since 2015, ending the second longest drought in the league at 10-7. Unbelievable. And of course, the last 2 games, the Bengals went, the last two games before they lost to the Browns earlier, they were going off, and they didn't really try to play today. They were resting their stars, so if they played them, they might have won that, and that might have given them a better seeding perhaps. So this Bengals team could be scary going into the playoffs, but I still have some concerns, though, if they're quite ready to take on playoff games. Then we get to the wildcard teams, and this one's surprise. The Raiders! They made the playoffs for the first time as the Las Vegas Raiders. And how about this? If you told me after Gruden was fired that the Raiders were still going to make the playoffs, I wouldn't believe you. I thought they were going to tank. And although they kept that momentum up for quite a bit, when they got destroyed by Chiefs and they were 6-7 way back, it nah, they're not going to make it. But they did it. They won 4 straight close games, and they actually took a big gamble to try and beat the Chargers just now instead of going for the tie, which if I was in the Raiders' shoes, I would have just gone for the tie and secured my playoff spot. But they won it, as they are in the playoffs for the first time since 2016, and in the 3rd longest drought in the league, too. That was a big win for them. Hey, congratulations to being in the playoffs. I still don't think you're really a good team, but hey, you made it here, so you're one of the last 14 remaining to get this title. And then, of course, the 6th seed is the Patriots. As I predicted early in the year, they are at worst going to be like 7 wins. At best, they were going to be 10 wins. Well, they matched my best case scenarios. They went 10-7, and they made back to the playoffs for the first time since 2019. The first time without Brady with Belichick. Now, of course, this is the first time with Belichick as the head coach that the Patriots are a wild card team. All the times they made the playoffs was a winning the division. So this will be kind of interesting to see, especially how they play in the playoffs. And of course, just like the Bills, the Patriots statistically are way better than their record indicates. They're just like the Bills in this regard. So they can be a scary team in the playoffs. And then finally, the Steelers sneaking in thanks to the Chiefs, the Raiders decided to not go for the tie, and the Colts blowing it too, as they are in the playoffs for the 2nd year in a row. Although they're still not really a good team, you can't underestimate them. They got here, and the Steelers have made quite massive runs as wildcard teams. Remember 2005 when they won the Super Bowl as the 6th seed. They could do it again, perhaps. Then, the NFC side. As for the 2nd year in a row, the Packers are NFC, home field advantage, the number 1 seed, I mean to say. They've made the playoffs and won the NFC North for the 3rd year in a row. Technically, they did worse this year because they were 13-4 when they went 13-3 the last 2 years, but whoop-de-doo, big deal. Although, I'm still not fully convinced either, like the Titans, that the Packers are the best team in that conference. I don't think they're as good as they were in last year. Maybe they're a little bit better than 2019, but I have a little bit of concerns about them going to the playoffs. But hey, home field advantage right now, so we'll see if they can make it this time around, unlike last year. And then the defending champion Buccaneers had the best season in their history as they went 13-4, and they made the playoffs for the 2nd year in a row, and they won the NFC South for the first time since 2007. Now, of course, they're a good team, but they have a lot of injuries to worry about, so that's also kind of a concern for the Buccaneers going to the playoffs. And I don't think they're as good as they were last year. Passing offense is good, but their rushing offense, no. Their defense, no. And all the injuries with the receivers, that's going to be kind of a concern going into the playoffs that the Buccaneers are going to have to worry about. And then the Cowboys went 12-5, their best record since 2016, as they made it back to the playoffs and won the NFC East for the first time since 2018. This Cowboys team is actually pretty scary, as after they had that strong start, then they struggled when they were 6-4, but they exploded after that. They've won every game but one. So they statistically are up there as like one of the better teams. So you gotta watch out for them. If everything goes right, they could be a scary threat in the playoffs. And then, of course, the Rams, who made the playoffs for a 2nd year in a row, and they won the NFC West for the first time since 2018. I have some concerns about them, though, because remember earlier in the year, they've been very inconsistent. And remember, Matthew Stafford has played really bad these last 3 games. Would he throw at least 6 interceptions, I think, if not more, and probably just barely any more than that in touchdowns. So he's struggling, and that's not a good sign going into the playoffs, so you gotta watch out for that, Rams. And your defense isn't as good as last year, so I actually have some concerns with you right now. And then we get to the wild card teams. The Cardinals, they ended the 2nd longest drought in the league. They made the playoffs for the first time since 2015. Although they did choke, remember, they were 7-0. So they actually had a losing record down the stretch going 4-5. And remember, they had the chance to get home field advantage, and they blew it. They blew their chance to win the division as well, especially with the Rams losing. So, unfortunate for them. But hey, statistically, outside of maybe the Cowboys, they statistically are one of the best teams, not only in the NFC, but up there in the league. Like, last I checked, they were in the top 10 in, like, almost every single category when it comes to, like, yards and such. So, although the record might be a kind of a lie, we gotta have some concerns with them. I mean, you have to be worried about facing them, perhaps. And then the 49ers, after they struggled earlier in the year, they turned it around and made the playoffs for the first time since 2019, as they are also a scary team as well, but they are inconsistent though, remember. And then finally, the Eagles, as they made the playoffs for the first time since 2019, just sneaking in as the NFC was weak out pretty much in the wild card spots, so impressive for them. But now, it's now time for my playoff predictions. Okay, so of course, here is the current playoff bracket, as I'm going to go by the schedule based upon what I remember it being. And of course, the divisional round schedule has not been set, I guess because they only know 2 of the matchups, but still, I think you should be able to at least set the 2 games. That's kind of annoying. So anyways, here is my playoff picks. As we start off with the wildcard round, the first game is the Raiders at the Bengals. This is a rematch from earlier in the year when the Raiders lost to the Bengals when they hosted them. And this is the first time they've played in the playoffs since the 1990 divisional round. So, that's quite incredible back when they were in Los Angeles. And that was the last game before, the game before the Bengals won their last game too. So, this will be kind of interesting. This might be an offensive shootout. And the Bengals should maybe be worried about the Raiders, because they did win 4 in a row when it looked like they were done. And I think 3 of the 4 were defensive close ones. So, yeah, you got to be worried about that one. That could be almost a toss-up, but I think I'll lean towards the Bengals still for this one. But I won't be surprised if the Raiders get it. Alright, then after that, it was the Patriots at Bills. This is a divisional matchup. They played each other twice. Of course they played each other twice. And the away team won both ones. Remember, Patriots beat the Bills on Monday night, 14-10. And then the Bills went into Foxborough and beat them both like 33-21 or something like that. This is, I believe, the first time they've played in the playoffs, I think. Other than... Oh, that's right. I remember, thanks to Jay Gator 9, that NFL historian, the Bills and Patriots played in a playoff game in the 1965 AFL champion playoffs, I think. So this actually might be this is the first time they've played each other in the playoffs in over 50 years. Ain't that gonna be crazy? And this one is, on paper, I think, gonna be the most closest and insane game of all the wild cards. These two teams are way better than their record indicates. They have elite defenses. The Patriots' offense isn't necessarily elite, but they have the stats to almost back up other than their Russian offense. The Bills are very elite in that regard. This one could go either way, but I think I'll pick the Bills for this one, as they are playing a lot better than the Patriots right now, and I'm sure they're not going to let that game happen again like last time when they played them on Monday night when they got ran over to oblivion. All right, then we got to the Sunday action, as it starts off with the Eagles at the Buccaneers, as this is the first time they've played each other in the playoffs since the 2002 NFC Championship. How about that? Now, unfortunately although the Buccaneers have injuries, I'm still not fully convinced the Eagles are going to put up enough firepower to stop the Buccaneers, and I definitely don't trust their defense. And of course, this is a rematch from earlier in the year. Remember when they played each other on Thursday night when the Buccaneers won that? Although I think the Eagles played pretty competitively until like the final bits of it. But I'm going to still pick the Buccaneers to get this one. Of course, they would host the other divisional game. And then it would be the 49ers at the Cowboys, as this is the first time they've played in the playoffs since the 1994 NFC Championship. And of course, this is a rematch, remember, from last year when the 49ers won in an offensive slugfest, although both teams were injured. These teams are radically different than when they last played each other last year. But the Cowboys are much better compared to the 49ers being better. So I'm picking the Cowboys still to get this one. But I guess the 49ers could put up a close fight. Then we get to the final AFC game, as it would be the Steelers at the Chiefs. This is a rematch from just 2 weeks ago, and this is the first time they played each other in the playoffs since the 2016 divisional round. So the Steelers, remember, got crushed by the Chiefs 36-10. So unfortunately, the Steelers are not good, and the Chiefs are one of the best teams in the league right now. But, and of course, even though you beat them early in the year in a blowout, do not underestimate the Steelers, Chiefs. The Steelers have a history when they play a team in the playoffs that crushed them early in the year. They come back to beat them. So do not underestimate them. But I'm still going to pick the Chiefs for this one. So with that, the Bengals go up here and the Bills come down here as the Chiefs host the Bills. Alright, so then the final game on Monday night, which I don't really like that idea of them having a playoff game on Monday night. I like them all to be on Saturday and Sunday in that regard, especially when it comes to days of rest. So anyways, that would be a NFC West matchup, as it's the Cardinals at the Rams. And of course, this is a rematch from, in the terms of playoffs, I believe since 1974 or 75, during one of those years when the Cardinals won the division title in those years. So it's been a long time since they last played each other in the playoffs. And of course, this is a rematch, divisional matchup from both years, this year. And the away team won both games pretty convincingly. Remember the Cardinals in week 4 when they visited the Rams, they just obliterated them to give them their first loss in the year. And the Rams pretty much killed the Cardinals' momentum earlier in the year too, when they gave them that loss when they were 10-2. So this one is kind of difficult to pick, because the Cardinals, yes, they have struggled. They've gone 1-4 after they were 10-2, and they lost to the Rams last time they played. But they statistically are better than the Rams. And the Rams are struggling too, remember. Stafford has played terribly. So you know what? In an upset, I think I'm going to pick the Cardinals to get this one. As I trust them more than the Rams. At least their stats back up their how they play compared to the Rams. Alright, so then we get to the divisional rounds, and of course we don't know the schedule, so I'll just do top to bottom in each side. So we'll start off with the Bengals at the Titans. This would be the first time they've played in the playoffs since 1990, the wildcard round, which was the last time the Bengals won a playoff game. The Bengals are a scary team to watch out for the Titans, because remember, like I said earlier, the Titans I don't think are good enough to be the number 1 seed. The Bengals definitely have a lot of momentum on their side. And of course, if Derrick Henry comes back, the Titans could be very scary. This is probably going to come down to whether or not Derrick Henry comes back. And from what I last heard, the indications he might come back, it's like leaning towards more yes than no. And that's going to probably be the deciding factor for it. So if that's the case, I might just barely edge out the Titans against the Bengals. And I mean barely. If it isn't for Derrick Henry coming in, I might actually pick the Bengals. So I might make a separate playoff bracket depending on if Henry plays or not. If he does play, then I'll pick the Titans barely. But if they don't, I'll pick the Bengals actually pull off the upset. So I'll update that in a little bit. But then it'll be the Bills at the Chiefs, as it's a rematch from earlier in the year. Remember when the Bills went into Arrowhead and crushed the Chiefs during their struggle? And of course the rematch from the AFC Championship last year. This time in the divisional round. Now, this time around, at that point in the year, the Bills were just as good as they were early in the year. They were extremely dominant, remember, early on in the year. But this was during the time the Chiefs were struggling pretty badly. Now the Bills are going to be facing a Chiefs team that they never faced before in these last few years. The last year's Chiefs teams, they were really good offenses, but not really good defenses. Now and that's what they faced too earlier in the year. Now they're going to be facing a team with a really good defense and a really good offense. And this time around, I don't think it's going to be enough for them to get the revenge. So I'm going to pick the Chiefs to get this one and make it to the AFC Championship for the 4th year in a row. Titans' first AFC Championship appearance since 2019. Alright, then in the divisional round, it would be the Cardinals at the Packers, as this will be the first time they've played in the playoffs since the 2015 divisional round, which was the last time the Cardinals won a playoff game. Now, this would be very interesting because statistically the Cardinals are better than the Packers. But I don't think they're better than the Packers, though, when it comes to playing. This one is almost kind of close to a toss-up, possibly, if the Cardinals actually show up based upon their stats. But I'm going to probably pick the Packers still for this one. And they're in the NFC Championship for the third year in a row. Then we get to the Buccaneers. Cowboys at the Buccaneers, as this is a rematch from Week 1, remember. And this is the first time they've played in the playoffs since the 1982 round 1 of the playoffs when they had that 16 playoff bracket in 1982. So it's been almost 40 years since they last played in the playoffs. And of course, like I said, this is a rematch from earlier in the year in Week 1. And remember, the Buccaneers barely beat the Cowboys in that one. And honestly, ever since that loss, the Cowboys have played really good. They've gotten better and better as the season's going on. Meanwhile, the Buccaneers have gotten worse, honestly. Their defense isn't as good, their running game isn't as good, and they have so many injuries. So you know what? I'm going to pick the Cowboys in a possible upset to dethrone the Buccaneers and make it to the NFC Championship for the first time since 1995. So, the AFC Championship. The AFC Championship would be first. It would be the Chiefs at the Titans. The first time they played in the playoffs since the 2019 AFC Championship. And a rematch from early in the year. We got a lot of rematches here. And remember, the Titans gave the Chiefs their last loss. They gave the Chiefs their last loss when they were a really bad team earlier in the year. But now the Chiefs are scary. And the Titans still are struggling in this regard. And I'm just not fully convinced. The history is on the side for the Titans. They beat them early in the year and all that. And they did give the Chiefs a run for their money when in the AFC Championship 2 years ago, remember. And the Titans also beat them last time they hosted them too in the regular season, 2019 as well. So the history is on the Titans side, and as we've seen so far this year, they somehow keep finding ways to win when they should be losing. But I think this time around with the Chiefs being better, I think it'll be just enough for them to make the comeback, make it. And I'm going to pick the Chiefs to get the win and make it to the Super Bowl for the third year in a row, replicating the Patriots doing it back in 2016 to 18. And then finally, the Cowboys at the Packers. This would be the first time they played in the playoffs since the 2016 divisional round. And this one will be interesting to say the least. Just like in statistically, the Cowboys, I think, statistically are better than the Packers. And unlike the Cardinals, I actually trust the Cowboys more in this one. I actually would say the Packers could be somewhat of an underdog in this game. The Cowboys really have a lot of momentum on their side. I don't fully trust the Packers, just like I definitely don't really trust the Titans in this one. This could go probably any way with them. I could probably see the Cowboys getting it. But unfortunately, that one's a tough one because the Cowboys choke in the playoffs, but the Packers have also choked in the playoffs in the NFC Championships, as we've seen multiple times since they last made the Super Bowl in 2010. Whose chokes do you think is going to cost them more? That is such a tough one. If this is going to be the case, I honestly... this is a tough one. I think I might just edge out the Cowboys chokes over the Packers. So I think I'll pick the Packers to win it and make it to the Super Bowl for the first time since 2010. So, the Super Bowl 56 down in Los Angeles. We had this opportunity almost in 2019. We almost had this opportunity in 2020. But then in 2021, it might finally happen, as Super Bowl 56 would be the Chiefs and the Packers, as the NFL will cream themselves to finally have Aaron Rodgers and Mahomes face each other. Since remember, they've played each other, their teams played each other twice in the last 2 years, but they've never actually played each other. Mahomes missed the one in 2019, Aaron Rodgers missed the one earlier in the year. Now, statistically in this one, the Chiefs no. I think statistically overall, just based upon the stats I've seen, I think they're even offensively when it comes to their stats. Like, they're pretty close. Maybe, just maybe, a slight edge to the Chiefs, I think. I'm trying to remember their stats off the top of my head from when I last made my picks. Meanwhile, against their defense, statistically, I think the Packers' defense is just better, but I trust the Chiefs' defense more lately. Like, the Packers statistically are playing better, but the Chiefs' defense is playing better overall, as we've seen after they start off 3-4. This could be kind of an interesting one, almost a toss-up too. And of course, I'm sure the Chiefs want to get that taste out of get that awful taste out of their mouth after they got crushed by the Buccaneers last year in the Super Bowl. But I think I might have to pick the Chiefs for this one and win the Super Bowl for the first time since 2019 and get their 5th title overall. 1962, 1966, 1969, 2019, and then 2021. Alright, so those are my picks for the playoffs. Now, of course, like I said, this is with Derrick Henry playing. So if he plays, my picks, of course, will be Chiefs over the Steelers, the Bills over the Patriots, the Bengals over the Raiders, the Buccaneers over the Eagles, the Cowboys over the 49ers, and Cardinals over the Rams. And the NFC is the same, though. The Packers over the Cardinals, the Cowboys over the Buccaneers, and the Packers over the Cowboys. Now, with Derrick Henry playing, I'm going to pick the Titans over the Bengals and the Chiefs over the Bills. Now, if Derrick Henry doesn't play, I'll pick the Bengals instead, but it would instead be the Bengals at the Chiefs. But I think the Chiefs would win if they hosted. The Bengals put up a good fight, but if they're hosting the Bengals, I think this time to get around. So honestly, it doesn't even matter if you think about it. Bengals, Titans, it doesn't matter. I think the Chiefs could still probably get it in the end. So that's my Super Bowl pick. The Chiefs beating the Packers. So we'll see what happens if the Super Bowl matchup is different. I'll do an update video on my Super Bowl prediction, because I've been making playoff predictions on YouTube since 2015. I've gotten the Super Bowl matchup from the playoffs correct only one time, and that was the first time with the Panthers and Broncos, and I got all the playoff matchups correct all the way up to the Super Bowl, believe it or not, if you want to go watch that video. 2016, I picked the Patriots and the Cowboys. It ended up being the Patriots and Falcons. 2017, I picked the Patriots and Vikings. It ended up being the Patriots and Eagles. 2018, I was completely wrong, where I thought it was going to be the Ravens and Saints. It ended up being the Patriots and Rams. 2019, I thought it was going to be the Ravens and 49ers. It ended up being the Chiefs and 49ers. And last year, I was wrong completely, where I thought it was going to be the Bills and Packers. It ended up being the Chiefs and Buccaneers. So we'll see. But my prediction right now for the Super Bowl is the Chiefs over the Packers. So see you guys right after the AFC Championship, the Conference Championships possibly, if the Super Bowl matchup's different. So see you guys then, and I cannot wait for the 2022 season to get back to my picks.